I know you've lived like all over the world. Did you ever live in Los Angeles?
I don't like Los Angeles. I got very badly sunburned and almost punctured myself on what was surely a heroin needle on the beach there, my first visit. Within hours. It was my first 20 hours in Los Angeles were awful.
Yeah, that's enough to put you off.
Yeah, that sticks with you. Hello and welcome everyone to the Two Reel Cinema Club. I am not Dr. James Ruzicka.
And I am not Andres Lorente. We are, I was going to say we are, why have I written this in my notes? We are coming out on this episode. Personally, I'm not coming out. I don't know about you, but we've watched two movies sort of about coming out.
Yes.
Albeit the experience of coming out are more than 100 years apart. I think so. Two movies which suggest that a lot has happened in a century, and also some things have kind of stayed the same.
You're right. The films are about 35, 38 years apart, something like that.
Yeah.
But you're right. The eras they cover are distant. I think Maurice. Or what are we going to call it? Morris or Maurice?
I think we have to call it Morris. I've been telling everybody we're watching Maurice this week, and it was only when I sat down and actually watched it this week that I realised that I've been making a fool of myself everywhere.
Yes.
So Morris, we have watched,
which is 1910 to 1914. It doesn't quite get into World War I, something like that. Yep. And then, the thing about Am I OK from 2022 is it also sort of covers a couple of years because it had its release at Sundance in January of 2022. And it's just hitting the streaming services here now in June of 2024.
And you may well be asking yourself, why has there been a 2-year delay before this film got distribution widely? And maybe we will be able to answer that question for you. We'll start with the new movie, Am I OK? Directed by, and this is another name that I'm going to get wrong. It's Tig Notaro, isn't it?
Well done. Well done. You did not get that wrong.
I was practicing.
She co-directed with her wife, Stephanie Allen.
I'm so glad you said that because I also wasn't sure how to pronounce her surname either, which is Allynne. Mm-hmm. I've been saying Aline all week, and clearly it's not Aline.
I've just been calling everything Maurice this week. Everyone, Tig Maurice, Stephanie Maurice. Dakota Maurice.
But from a script by Lauren Pomerantz, I had to look her up. But she has been a writer on SNL.
Yep.
She's been a writer on Community. She's been a writer for many years on the Ellen DeGeneres show. She wrote some episodes of Me, Myself, and I, Strange Planet, which is the kind of comedy animation. Mm-hmm. So she has come from TV comedy. And maybe we'll have something to say about that when we talk about the film.
I think I will, for sure. Yeah. You are on the ball today. I tried to wrong foot you with the introductions, and you did not miss a beat. And then Tig Notaro, where did that come from, man? That's good pronunciation.
Only because you told me the other week, that's why.
Shall we get a little bit deeper into the story of Am I OK? Should we ask that question more seriously now? James, am I OK?
Are you okay? That's a good question, but only you can answer it.
Well, I'm still okay after seeing this film, which is a good sign. Features Dakota Johnson as Lucy, and here I might not get this one right. Sonoya Mizuno as Jane.
Yeah, I'll buy that. Yep. Who appeared in Civil War a few weeks ago. I'm struggling to remember which character she played.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
But she was in Civil War.
Civil War I've blocked that out successfully, so I'm in a happier place now. Jermaine Fowler plays Jane's boyfriend Danny. Kiersey Clemens as Brittany, who is a massage therapist in the office where Lucy, that's Dakota Johnson, works as a receptionist. Are you ready for a synopsis?
I would love a synopsis.
Okay.
And it's not a long film, so I'm not expecting this to take a very long time.
I'm trying to shorten my synopses, but not my synapses. I want to lengthen those and shorten the synopses. We open on blue skies and beautiful pictures of Los Angeles. So we know where we are, but the film really begins with this diner scene where Lucy and Jane have what looks to be like a routine dinner date together, where Lucy always orders the same things. What is it, a veggie burger and a sweet potato fries or something like that?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Lucy declares, "You don't know me," to which Jane replies, "I do know you." I think that's a really heavy moment. I think that really tells us a lot about what's going to happen. They establish that Lucy is just friends with her current dating partner, Ben, and perhaps she has some feelings for women. Eventually we get to one of these cliche scenes. Ooh, we're going to need the cliche squad. I'll just say that now. She opens a window in her office and sees the new massage therapist, Brittany, with whom she starts to have a flirtatious friendship. Is there some romance there? Meanwhile, Jane is destined to go back to her English roots to open a London office of her advertising agency. I think that's what it was. Is that
I think it is. As far as I can tell, she spends most of her working life typing on a large Macintosh.
Okay.
And I'm guessing that's what advertising is. Is it maybe?
I think so. It was a nebulous career at best. She will surely be joined in London by her long-term boyfriend, Danny. Although devastated at the thought of losing Jane to a career move, Lucy explores a physical relationship with Brittany, and Jane and Lucy go to a lesbian dance club called The Womb. I think I remember that, right?
Yeah.
Together, which leads to some requisite, dramatic, overplayed, and unbelievable tension between the two best friends, and it leads to their friend breakup, which had to happen, right? Will their friendship be lost forever? You can answer these questions if you want to. Will Lucy discover love with a woman and come out to her friends and to herself? Will Brittany move on from her dalliance with Lucy to return to her quirky ex-boyfriend in Portland, Oregon? Will Danny accompany Jane to London? And if not Danny, then who?
That's good. That almost makes me want to see the film, actually. You described it so vividly.
Thank you.
So I don't know about you. I came to the end of this film, so I think you would call it a kind of, it's lesbian comedy. Is that the name of a genre? I think it's a kind of comedy of manners, with a sort of sapphic tone.
There was a title that came out in the film that probably should have been used, which was Vagice Cream.
Yes.
There was a gag moment. I laughed hilariously. It didn't really make a whole lot of sense, but it was nice and it was funny. And I think that it's probably a better title than Am I Okay? But
I got to the end of it and I thought, have I watched a movie or is this like a sitcom pilot?
Yeah.
Or is it just a sitcom episode or more even than that? I came away feeling, I feel like I have watched somebody's stand-up routine that has been stretched into, a series of dramatic sketches in a kind of Seinfeld style story.
Yep.
That's kind of what I came away from at the end. This film didn't quite feel like a film to me. It felt like, a sitcom and one that's, I hate to say this, not quite funny enough.
Now, if you read interviews with Lauren Pomerantz, it sounds very very personal to her. It sounds very much like it's the story of her life to a certain extent.
Okay.
And I agree with you. I wrote a few baffling things to myself. I said, is this writing a comedy with a story, or is it a story that has a little bit of comedy in it? It's not long, which, you can have some great films that are 80 minutes, but this one has the 5 minutes of dragged out credits after 79 minutes or whatever of film. And I never felt like I was really watching a cinematic piece of work. It really did feel like there were a couple of gags in there. A couple of them were good and funny, but they came out of nowhere. I think that's what it was. It wasn't that they came out of the situation so much or the characters so much. A lot of the gags just sort of come out of nowhere. So as a result, it's a little hard to take seriously because it does feel like either a series of sketches, or I think you've given a good analogy too of a stand-up routine that's about the length of a stand-up routine, right? Maybe an hour and a half at most, even an hour. So there's not a lot of gristle there, not a lot of meat to the story.
I mean, part of the reason it feels like a stand-up routine that's been turned into a drama is because, there's quite a number of gags. Most of the characters, I would argue, have a very similar voice. People largely speak the same way and have the same tone and the same sense of humor. And it feels like it's been sort of squeezed a little bit like the way they make sausages. You start up with one long tube and you just squeeze it here and here and here. And it's been squeezed with some hero's journey sort of turning points.
Very much so, yeah.
So you have a premise. Oh, two friends, one is coming out, and then you have a deadline. I have a new job in London in 6 months.
Yeah.
And then they meet some allies and some enemies. And there's even a moment that you could call the all is lost moment. Just before the third act.
Yes.
It feels like it's a series of gags that have been edited into making a movie.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I didn't feel like there was too much original here, and I felt like the ending I foresaw when you at that moment where the all is lost moment could become pretty clear what's going to happen. So it's easy to forecast that. And I mentioned in the synopsis the breakup happens so suddenly and over such a minor point. Really, it just seems like, oh, I've got to break these people apart so that they can come back together in the third act, and that's exactly what happens. And it just didn't feel believable at all to me. It was just forced tension.
And like some of that, I think I wouldn't mind if there were hilarious gags that left me clutching my sides. But apart from a couple of amusing moments, it didn't quite hit my funny bone, I must say.
Didn't I say veg ice cream though?
But do you know what? I wrote veg ice cream in my notes as well. That's clearly the funniest gag. Nothing's going to beat that. Shall we ring the spoiler bell at least?
Oh yes,
so
please.
That we can talk about it with impunity. I'll ring the bell. Oh, there it goes, echoing across the Los Angeles hillscape.
Beautiful.
I personally felt that one of those important screenwriting precepts that I'm sure you and I have talked about often is the promise of the premise. You set up this sort of simple idea, and it promises a bit of adventure, doesn't it? And when you have this setup of two girlfriends, they live these kind of busy urban lives. One of them is coming out. The promise of that premise is the one obvious plot point, which this film doesn't deliver. And I'm not sure what I think about this. Did you feel that this film was demanding a plot point where Lucy announces that she is in love with Jane? I felt that was like the inevitable turning point of the film. This is the thing which kind of had to happen. And it kind of doesn't happen, and as a result, I think that the story ends up being just a bit too bland and easy. I think that's, overall, that for these characters, for Lucy, coming out as gay, I think the stakes are fairly low, the risks are fairly low, the price she has to pay is fairly low. There's a bit of crying. But I wrote in my notes, it's about as deeply emotional as getting upset trying to assemble some IKEA furniture and then finding that you've put the wardrobe door on wrong. Oh no, I'll have to unscrew it and reverse it and do it again, bursts into tears. I mean, that's about as existential as it gets, I think. She kind of figures out, well, actually, maybe I prefer girls. And then immediately she has this very attractive work colleague who's absolutely falling all over her. It feels like nothing comes too hard for her. And I was thinking, well, if the plot makes the step that the person that she's really in love with is Jane, and then you have a love triangle, and then you have real stakes and something that could genuinely go badly wrong, then you have a bit more of a story. But at least unless there is something subtle which I, in my crassness, didn't detect, I don't think it goes down that road.
Firstly, I think you underestimate how frustrating it is to assemble IKEA furniture. Because I cry, I shout, I scream, I swear. So that said, I think you're right that there would be so much more tension and more realistic tension and more existential tension if that were the case. If that she had feelings for Jane that they couldn't possibly really act on. That would make a much more interesting breakup and reunion, I think. There's no reason for them to split up when they do. There's this little bit of, that Jane starts kissing a woman. They go out to the womb, and Jane starts kissing a woman, and Lucy storms out, and then they get mad at each other. It's a workplace break-up too, right? She goes to the office where they don't really do anything. I think it's in advertising. But they do have Sean Hayes come in, and he's another comedian. He has his comic moments too. But again, it's not coming out of the story so much as it's just who they have as actors and actresses and what they need at a certain time. But they have this big blowout. It was very public at her workplace. Nothing seemed real about it. It was just, and I think you're right. If it's something much more personal and much more intense and consequential, it would have been a better breakup and would have forced a much harder reunion. Everything does fall together pretty easily for the characters here, and then maybe that's because it's a comedy. It's supposed to be that light, but you still need to have some depth to the plot points. But you have a good point. I hadn't even thought about that, but that is a good idea to have her fall more for Jane than have her ramble around with Brittany, and that relationship doesn't go very well. Brittany's not really committed, and she has this boyfriend, and there are all these convenient outs, right? I mean, I think that's very easy to get out of situations as well. So it's not that it's not difficult; it's enough for the characters. It's also too easy for them to get out of anything that's even remotely difficult.
I mean, I don't really see how Lucy can't be in love with Jane, because she only knows 3 people in the whole world, doesn't she?
Yeah.
One of them is Ben, so she's not interested in him.
Yeah.
One of them is Brittany, who immediately goes to bed with her.
Yeah.
And then the only other person she knows in the world is Jane. So how could it not be a thing?
It's a small city, Los Angeles.
I looked it up. Los Angeles has 12 million inhabitants. And yet, as far as the film goes, no, actually, there's about 5. There's 5 people who live in Los Angeles.
Wow.
Plus a waiter.
A very nice waiter. He doesn't seem to remember their orders very well. But
yes, even though they order the same thing. It's worth hesitating a little while we look at the opening image of the film. I wasn't going to interrupt you earlier, but the opening image, I think, says quite a bit about the film insofar as you do have some pretty cute still photos of girlfriends hanging out, and then the opening image is of 2 young women. You're sitting in a cafe consuming things, basically, or at least planning to consume things. That's sort of what the movie is, isn't it? I think it's these kind of 2 young women with sort of their lives ahead of them and prospects and opportunities, and they're consuming things.
Yeah.
I think the film kind of maybe inadvertently sets out its stall in that first scene.
There weren't a lot of great scenes that really struck with me. If anything, I was sort of jolted by some scenes instead of being particularly impressed with. There's not a lot of big filmmaking here. There are not a lot of directorial statements, and that's okay. If you're telling a good story, I think that's okay. But there were some more scenes that just didn't make sense to me to include than there were really compelling scenes. And I heard an interview on National Public Radio here where they were really going into how compelling that first scene is when I think they've gone out to dinner, they're a little bit drunk, and then Jane comes over to do a slumber party thing, so they're both on the bed talking, and maybe that's that moment that you were thinking about, like she's just announced that maybe she likes women, and this is the woman who means the most to her in her life, and why aren't they together? And it's actually not that deep a scene. It really didn't. I don't know. Maybe I'm just a cold-hearted person, but I didn't really feel that emotionally attached to the scene or the characters at that moment, and that's one of the like crux scenes of the whole film, and it doesn't really come off that well. And then it's not long before there's this bizarre, it's an underwear scene. I don't know how to describe it, but Brittany comes over and she says, "Oh, let's take off our clothes and try on each other's clothes, and maybe we divide clothes." And I think this was their first date. Maybe this is their second date. I don't know.
I think so. And there's Lucy thinking, "I wonder whether she likes me. Does she like me? Is that possible?" Yeah. Oh, yeah. I wonder.
And it seemed like you just want to get Dakota Johnson in her panties and nothing else. It was an odd moment for me, and either I'm cold-hearted or I'm old-fashioned or some sort of combination of both. But the scenes didn't really add up into a story that really took me on the journey that I think the writer and the filmmakers thought they were taking us on. Maybe we're not the audience for this film as well. I think we have to consider that. But at any rate, I think it could have been better written, and it probably could have been better directed as well.
You remember when we talked about The Fall Guy, and one of my big complaints about that movie was that almost all of the character interactions are just meet cutes, and there are like 7 or 8 meet cutes one after another. And this film is kind of the same. I started writing them down and thinking of clever names for them. So it starts out in the diner with an eat cute.
Yep.
and then you have kind of Jane's job. It's a work cute, and then at the restaurant, they have a toilet cute.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Where the two of them are in the toilet together, but it's cute there. And then, then they're on the bed having a bed cute. And then Brittany comes around and they have a cook cute.
That's right.
And then a try-on cute. And even the argument at the office, I wrote argue cute. Every scene is kind of cute. And that's nice for one or two scenes. But when every scene has that same tone, you start to ask yourself, am I wrong for expecting a little more?
No, not at all. I don't think so. I think that, I was expecting more because I like Tig Notaro. She's very, very funny. I think Dakota Johnson's really become a very good actress. I really like watching her on screen. But I just don't think the material's there. And, then you start thinking about, why did HBO Max or whoever they are now wait 2.5 years to get it out? And they're probably just looking for, I don't know, the right time, or they were obviously hesitant about this film. But, I've seen Dakota Johnson, I've seen Tig Notaro doing the podcasts and the TV shows to try and publicize it. It just seems a little strange because I can't remember it. I saw it 2 weeks ago. I can't imagine that they remember this film at all unless they probably had to rewatch it just to figure out what it was about.
I could only assume that Dakota Johnson, having just been in Madame Web, as you know, I think I'm guessing that it was assumed that the Spider-Man, the Spider-Woman, Spider-Girls film would be a big tentpole release, and so Dakota Johnson will be on everybody's mind this spring. So that was exactly the right time to release another Dakota Johnson picture, just to quickly cash in on the fantastic success of Madame Web.
That's good.
And unfortunately, this strategy failed because Madame Web was so abysmally bad.
Exactly.
But it was too late to change the release schedule, so I'm guessing that bit might be how it's arrived on screens now.
There were just a couple other just ridiculous scenes that kind of prove our points here. The hammock retreat scene, which is actually Tig Notaro acts in that scene. It's just ridiculous. It's not funny. It's not very good. And you think, okay, maybe if you cut these moments, you could make it a better film. But there was when you're in an 80-minute film, if you start cutting a 5-minute scene, you're down to this should be an hour-long special on network television or something. It changes the nature of it because there's not that much to cut, really.
I mean, this hammock retreat they go on, it feels like it could have just been cut and pasted from a completely different film. Or it feels like it's an SNL sketch.
It does feel like a skit.
It could be quite an amusing SNL sketch, completely as a standalone.
Yeah.
It doesn't belong in this film.
No, and then the last one is kind of the climax, which I saw as soon as both of the women sort of experience these breakups or these letdowns, these relationship disappointments at the same point. So they're on the same journey, basically. And then, of course, Lucy ends up taking Jane to the airport. And then she says, oh, by the way, I'm going to spend 2 weeks to help you move into London. Oh, you are? Oh, really? And great. Oh. But then there's this bad driver gag that is really silly where she just can't park in the driveway and she can't back out. And in Los Angeles, you have to be a good driver because everyone drives everywhere.
You have to drive.
So, I mean, there are a lot of crappy drivers, but they at least know some of the basic functions of a car and can manage to navigate a really difficult city to drive in because you're easily lost without GPS or something. So, and some of these gags just go on too long. The hammock thing, they probably needed the minutes, but the gag it's not solid enough to sustain the length of the scene. And similarly, the driving gag just it outlasts its welcome, I guess. So it's just another argument for how it feels more like a collection of gags as opposed to like good characterization moments or good story moments.
Yeah, it's a shame, isn't it? I sort of feel like that. I don't know. There could have been a really hilarious, cute lesbian comedy with teeth. With this cast and and there are some talented people involved.
Yeah,
but it seems a bit crass to lay all at the feet of the script.
Yeah,
and to suggest, well, if the script were better, then maybe the whole thing would have worked. But that's just what I'm going to say.
Yeah,
I think the basic scaffolding on which the film has been built just feels a little bit lacking.
I think ironically the script gets to where it should have been a lot earlier. Late on, and it shows a little bit of potential. It's when she's starting to date women, and these are kind of done as a montage, whereas those are the moments that probably would have been naturally more hilarious, would have really tested her on a journey, would have really taken her out of her comfort zone. I mean, it's amazing how quickly she retires from the one job that might sustain her a little bit, and then she can start painting again, and she's creating these beautiful canvases suddenly that she had, neglected for I don't know, years probably when she was working in the office there. There really could have been, I think, some growth and some funny stuff coming out of that, and some, honest difficulty about coming out and start making this decision to open up, be brave, expose yourself, and start dating women. I think that's a really compelling moment, and it could be hilarious as well. And that would have been gold if they'd milked that. Like, it really comes very late, and it's done more as a quick montage of her life change, and it's just not as effective, I don't think.
It feels like it's like buying an enormous double cheeseburger and taking it out the box and finding that the meat is just a tiny, tiny little sliver in between two massive pieces of bread, isn't it? It's just they need to. No, where's the beef? That's what I'm trying to say. Where's the beef?
Where's the beef?
Well,
it is a veggie.
Yep, no, you go.
I was just going to say it's a veggie burger that she orders, so there shouldn't be any beef anyway. She always orders
followed by veg ice cream. Yes. We should. One thing Los Angeles is famous for.
Yes.
Is police, probably, maybe. You can tell I'm trying to feel my way uncertainly towards a segue here, and it's not really working.
Yep.
So I'm just going to drop a dime and phone the Cliche Squad.
Cliche Squad.
The great thing about the Cliche Squad is that they know how to navigate that difficult Los Angeles traffic. So they come. They make it there. They are there for us.
They have siren for a reason. I've written down 3 cliches, but then I'm sure there are plenty more.
Yeah.
But the 3 I wrote down on my little list here, we've sort of touched on it already. Workers who do no work.
Yes.
So there are 2 workplaces in this film. But no work really appears to happen at either of them in any kind. I want one of those jobs. They look great. Can I just get paid to turn up and be cute? Is that all right?
Yeah. I have the same thing, yeah. Sustainable jobs, but with no responsibility and absolutely no customers, which is surprising because they're the ones who pay for the workers indirectly.
That was getting in the way. Do we have to have customers? Cliche number 2, tiny world. I've written. How many inhabitants does LA have? It's 5. It just doesn't seem to be any more than that. It's a tiny, tiny world that they live in. I mean, do either Jane or Lucy, do they not have parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, other friends, dependents? I mean, they appear to be people with no network of any kind whatsoever, don't they? Well,
there's the cat character who's a sort of a ridiculous office mate of Jane.
Who's kind of purely kind of comic relief,
yeah,
without very good gags.
Yeah, exactly.
And my third cliche is hard, not hard. I've written where hard things are basically not at all hard for any of these characters.
Yeah.
I read little. Luckily, the first woman Lucy meets is bi-curious and super attractive. Luckily, Jane gets a dream job handed to her on a plate. Luckily, Lucy can leave her job and be a painter with no means of support. Luckily, she has no friends or family or colleagues to disappoint or please or explain things to. It's just, my God, life is so streamlined, isn't it, for these characters? No mess, no fuss.
I think this is the difference between writing for some short forms, such as comic television or sketch comedy shows, and actually fleshing out a full story over 90 to 120 pages and getting characterization in it, as well as believable story and a satisfying ending. And it's a big jump. It's a big jump. So I hope Lauren Pomerantz can do it in the future, but I think this is a first effort. She got it produced, which is great.
I mean, it's a big jump in either direction, I think, because I think to go from writing features to then writing 22-minute comedy episodes, that is a hard job.
Exactly.
It's amazing discipline and structure to make these 22-minute comedy episodes work. And they're fantastically well written when they work. It's brilliant. I'm not going to say that someone who writes TV comedy is a slacker, because that's one of the hardest gigs, but these may not necessarily be skills that transfer to the feature space. I don't know.
Good point. We shared that one about jobs and the importance of good steady work. We share that one as a cliche. My 2 others are kind of similar, and the first one is goofy yoga classes and goofy yoga instructors, because I don't think I've ever seen a serious yoga class anywhere on television or in the films. I love yoga. I do it mostly alone these days, but classes are not really like that. Sure, you get the once in a once in a week, once in a lifetime, once in a month. I don't know, goofy instructor, but they're not all like that. And then the other one is just the goofy self-help retreats, the hammocking journey that Kat and Jane go on. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's not even, it's not funny. It's not even possible. I mean, I get it that the world is ridiculous and that's supposed to be absurd, but it didn't work for me. It didn't work for me.
Yeah.
What are you supposed to do? You're supposed to spend the whole week in the hammock or something like that. I mean, I laugh now, but maybe I'm laughing for all the wrong reasons. I wouldn't put that in.
We're laughing at the hammocks, not with the hammocks.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. And I think, you've got one or the other. You could either do a goofy yoga class and goofy yoga instructor, or you could do a goofy retreat. But I think you're stepping on thin ice. You're doing both.
Stepping on thin ice. There's not much of that in Los Angeles, but we've managed to find some.
Yes, we sure have.
Well, should we have a break? Maybe unwind with a goofy yoga class.
That's it.
And then come back and talk about a very different kind of coming out. And we'll talk about Maurice. This week's Two Real Cinema Club is sponsored by Easy Meal Kits. If you're like us, maybe you find it hard to plan meals. Are you stuck in a loop, making the same dishes again and again? Or do you find yourself buying takeout too often and now you're feeling the pinch? Well, then subscribe to Easy Meal Kits. For one low price, 3 times a week, they'll send you everything you need to make a new delicious meal. All you need to supply is the kitchen and the pans, and the ingredients, and the recipe. Just go out and buy any ingredients you think you might need, and then look up how to combine or cook them on the internet, or in a book, also not supplied. Add an easy spice pot that you made yourself by combining herbs and spices that you bought in a shop, and then add your favourite meat or vegetables from your own fridge. Choose rice, noodles, or fresh bread from a store. Add garlic and garnish from the grocer. Serve with a glass of wine or beer, not included. Easy Meal Kits contain everything you need except the hob, the plates, the cutlery, the utensils, the ingredients, any spices or seasoning, any drinks, in fact anything at all. They don't contain anything. It's just an empty box. Easy Meal Kits. Meal kits have never been easier. Sorry, I mean emptier. Meal kits have never been emptier.
Boy, I feel like pairing my box of instant meal kit with a glass of water from the tap.
From tap?
I'm getting hungry, but maybe we should move on to our next film.
There is a pattern forming. So let's move on to our other film, the second part of the double bill tonight. Maurice, yes, from 1987. Directed by James Ivory, produced by Ishmael Merchant. So back in the 80s, Merchant Ivory, so James Ivory and Ishmael Merchant, were like a massive force in the UK film industry.
Yep.
And kind of not so kind of well remembered these days, I think. So at the time they were making these kind of big art house hits that kind of broke out into the multiplexes. You know, they made these kind of characteristic heritage pictures. There was even a name for the genre. They did adaptations of classic literary novels by Henry James and E.M. Forster, and they made a lot of them, and some of them made a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And yet, kind of these films aren't quite as well remembered these days, I think, as maybe I thought they would be. I don't know. Had you seen Maurice before?
I had not seen Maurice. No, this was new for me. And this is 87, but, their films go back to the early 60s. So I remember seeing I think it's called The Householder, which is takes place in India. That's like 1963. That's a great film. But that goes way back. So they're 20 years into it by this point. I think they met in the late 50s. And I only realized that they were a couple in doing research on this film.
Yeah, same here. I didn't realise that either. It's kind of quite a sweet story. Really.
Yeah.
Their big hitters, A Room with a View, Howard's End, Remains of the Day.
Yeah.
I guess they count as the people who discovered Helena Bonham Carter, or at least brought her to prominence.
Yep.
And you look back on the films that they made now, and it's a fantastic 5-star array of well-known British and American actors in film after film after film. Just fantastic casts. And they they absolutely nailed that kind of heritage picture look and feel.
Yeah.
I also didn't know James Ivory won an Oscar only in 2017 for his work on the screenplay for Call Me by Your Name.
Yes. I was confused by that, but yeah.
So he's got this enormous and very distinguished career, but only gets the gong, very late in life.
Yeah.
Do you have any other questions for me, Counsel?
I must say, it's one of the films that comes to mind, I think, when you talk about the process of coming out.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good opportunity, I thought, to see it. And best of all, the Cambridge scenes were all filmed at my old college.
It's another film shot at your old college. I gotta make a film at one of my old colleges so I can say
most films seem to be made at my old college.
Yeah.
It had been made like I think the year or 2 years before we arrived at college.
Okay.
So. People were kind of still slightly buzzing with this excitement. Oh, they made a film here.
And was it another country that was also filmed there? Is that right?
No. So I must, having watched this film, having seen Another Country fairly recently, I do realise how much of a muchness these two films are.
Okay,
they go together hand in hand, don't they?
Yeah.
But no, Another Country was filmed in a building that looked a lot like my old school.
Yeah, because there's that punting scene.
There is a punting
kind of late
scene
in this film that looked a lot like maybe a punting scene in Another Country.
There's only so many film-based punting.
I've punted once in my life, and it was in the exact same place. I feel, but it was at actually Oxford, but Oxford, Cambridge, same thing, right?
Do you want to fight? Let me tell you the story of Maurice then, and we'll talk about it. So we are in Edwardian England before the First World War, and Maurice Hall, some years after receiving a bewildering explanation about sex from his school teacher, is a young man. He arrives in Cambridge to read classics, and there he finds himself falling in love with Clive, a fellow student. After an uncertain start and a bit of toing and froing, they enjoy some happy, candid times together. Until social pressures force them apart, Maurice is sent down, never to return. So instead, he becomes a stockbroker. Clive becomes a barrister and an aspiring politician. But when their old college friend Risley is arrested and sentenced to 6 months' imprisonment for propositioning a soldier in a pub, Clive realises that he's going to have to marry a woman and hide his true self if he wants to get on in life. But can a heartbroken Maurice cope with this rejection? Will he disintegrate? Will he marry a woman also? Or will he find a new love from an unexpected quarter?
Yes.
Oh, spoiler bell. Spoiler bell.
I realized that I stole all that questions at the end of the synopsis from you. I'm glad I went first today because I had lots of questions. And then you finished with lots of questions.
Yeah, I have questions. So, did you enjoy this film?
Isn't that what the Q part is? And the LGBTQ Q is questioning.
Questioning.
Is it questioning? Did I enjoy the film?
Did you enjoy the film? You're having to think.
I am having to think. I felt it was overly deliberate. It took a long time to get where it was going, I felt. And like for 1987, I'm thinking about me in 1987, I probably would have liked this film more. And I did like a lot of their films more. Now it felt a little bit I think their pictures in general always struck me as kind of stuffy because they are doing this heritage thing and they're doing it very well, and it's a good looking film. But I don't have a lot of sympathy for the characters. I guess I don't have a lot of camaraderie with the characters in general. But there is some nice classism in here. There's some touches, especially late in the film, that we'll talk about. And I think it's a very brave film for 1987. For me, this is a pretty brave film, which is interesting because, the films that we were seeing, I think, that we've talked about on the pod recently, like Another Country and this one, are much more daring than anything that was happening in the United States at that same time. I think.
Okay.
We were more into Beverly Hills Cop kind of stuff and 48 Hours and Another 48 Hours. And I think, those kinds of films were the dominant trends, I think, in 80s American cinema. So this is a brave piece, I think.
And I think it might have been too brave for a UK audience, actually, because after having a big hit with Room with a View, I don't think this really garnered very much of an audience. So it was kind of a theatrical flop.
Yeah, if you look at the gross, it's not strong at all. I mean, I think it was about $2 million to make and maybe $4 million to gross, something like that. I'll have to look again, but I do think it's a brave film. I think it's definitely it's a great production. I think I think of this as a great production. It's not necessarily a super compelling story or super compelling characters for me, but it does come off as this is cinema. It's definitely a work of art.
Yeah, it's more cinematic than Am I Okay? Yes, fair enough.
For sure.
I mean, I think it's more emotionally heightened than Am I Okay? I think there's more at stake and there's more to risk and more to lose.
Yeah.
The opening image, I think, is a sweet little summary of what the film has to say, insofar as the first thing you really see on screen is two kites flying high in the sky above a sunny beach, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then as the camera sort of moves across to the left, it's joined by some other kites, and there are some boys on a kind of school jaunt off to the seaside.
Yeah.
But this idea of these two kites flying together high above the rest of the world is a lovely image, which the film comes back to when it comes to its end as well. I think yet again your theory of extrapolating the meat of the film from that opening image works perfectly well in this film.
I will say it's an amazing contrast to the actual last image in this film. And I don't know, do we need to spoil or can we just keep rolling?
I think, shall we ring the spoiler bell?
Ring the darn thing.
Yeah, exactly. As we've noted, not a lot of people went to see this film in 1987. There will still be some people who haven't seen it now.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll ring the bell. Yep.
The reason I want to jump right to it is because you're absolutely right. It starts, I think it's the freedom of flying free, these two kites together. The last scene is actually Hugh Grant sort of locking himself into his pretend heterosexuality, isn't it? He's like closing all the windows, drawing all the shades on the bedroom of his wife. And it ends on Hugh Grant, who is, by this point, he's become a pretty minor character, actually. There's some interesting stuff happening in this film because he goes from being possibly a co-protagonist or protagonist. He ends up being a very minor character by the end, and symbolically he has chosen a different life, which he probably doesn't believe in, but he probably doesn't like or want. And it's kind of ambiguous how he and his wife feel about each other in that last scene. He's sort of adoringly hugging her, but then he's closing up everything and he's just shutting himself back in. He's not coming out at all compared to the two new couple lovers who are flying high as kites, kind of. I think interesting contrast.
Yeah, he's almost like he's looking out, through prison bars, isn't it? Yeah, he's kind of looking out through the window as his wife hugs him. It's the one remaining open window, or the one remaining unshuttered window, and he's reflecting on the life not lived, isn't he? The path not taken.
Yes,
he's specifically looking at that exact path. Or there's the one I'm not taking. Yes,
he lies too, right? She says, "Who are you talking to?" And I was just practicing, or I was trying out a speech, or something like that. That is a compelling moment. It ends very well. It begins quite well. So again, the beginning and ending image they nailed here in this film. It's perfect.
I did feel that the first half of this film is a lot more sure of itself than the second half, I think. I did make a couple of notes. The first being that there should be some genre which is called young men climbing in and out of windows movies, because that's exactly what happens in this film, and that's what happens in Another Country as well. Isn't it? It's young, well-dressed men with foppish hair climbing in and out of windows. That's what they do.
Yeah.
And those early scenes, I think it's a pretty cute scene when Simon Callow is the teacher teaching the 11-year-old Maurice, the ins and outs of sex in an entirely kind of a pathetic way on the beach. He's unable to say the word penis. He has to use Latin. And then at the end he says, "Never mention this to anyone, boy," he says.
What did you make out of the drawing, though? He's drawing, I guess it's the female genitalia on the beach, right, in the sand. He's got a stick and he's drawing something. And for me, I couldn't make anything out. I mean,
it looked more to me like like a poor Picasso pastiche on the sand rather than something out of a biology textbook.
Like a cubist tree or something like that. It was just, and he was all worried about other people coming and seeing it, but they wouldn't make anything out of that.
But following that, the scene's all set, at King's College. I think those have real authenticity, and I feel like there's a little bit of pace there, and I just felt like that first half of the film felt like by far the most believable. And there is this sweet scene of the two of them. They get out of Cambridge to kind of Grantchester or Little Shelford or something like that, one of those little villages, and they have a lovely day out. And the second half of the film, I think it's just a little bit less sure of itself. And I think most of the reason for that is because that's what the book is like. So, terrible bore that I am, I've read the book again this week as well.
Ooh, good for you.
And the film is very, very like the book. The film basically contains pretty much everything that is in the book. It's not a long book. It's only a couple of hundred pages, I think, 210 pages. So everything from the book is in the film, and the film has added some extra material. But E.M. Forster himself studied classics, at King's College in Cambridge, and those, that first half of the film, that first half of the book, feels authentically autobiographical. But I don't think he was a barrister, and I don't think he worked on the stock exchange. I don't think he was a stockbroker, and I think that second half of the film is very slightly more fantastical, and I think that's why it feels just a little bit less. Just a little bit less hanging together and a little bit less authentic.
Yeah, it also might be that it was difficult material to imagine putting on screen too. I think I'm assuming it was kind of controversial in 1987 in England.
Well, I mean, it was. Interestingly, it's a bit of history. And this is an entirely unfair question. Do you know what this film is really about?
Do I know what this film is really about? I'm guessing I don't, and you're being nice, so...
So I think this film is about Section 28, which is a bit of UK legislation which came in, which was being debated in the late 80s and then went on the statute books in 1988.
Oh, wow.
Which was basically a kind of a sort of anti-homosexuality bit of legislation, which I think it prohibited anything that would promote homosexuality. So it was aimed at schools and libraries and the arts, and basically it was like a statute to try and rub out all this sort of terrible, disgusting talk of gayness. And the scene which isn't in the book, which does appear in the film, is the scene which sees Lord Risley proposition a soldier in a pub, and then get arrested, and he's sentenced to 6 months hard labour. I think that scene, and the reason it exists, is because there was a very hot debate about Section 28 at the time, and so there were plenty of people in the country who were trying to protest against Section 28, but it did become law. I think it was law until something like 2003, I think.
Wow.
So, a surprising bit of pretty regressive, backward legislation that was coming in at the time that this film was being made. And I think that is the underlying theme of the film, although it's not explicitly stated. And I think the film makes a lot more sense when you understand the historical context that it's made in.
Yeah, definitely. And what a great way to respond to a law like that and a movement like that in a country, to come up with a piece of art that explores it, exposes it, judges it. I think that's great.
The book apparently, well, I don't. Have you read much Forster? I've read a couple, I think.
I don't think so. I'm trying to think what I've read. No, probably not.
I think Room with a View is just fantastic.
Yeah.
Howard's End is just remarkable, terrific book. Apparently, Maurice is supposed to be his worst book.
Okay.
But you know what? I've read some real dross this year. So reading Ian Forster's worst book was still a real pleasure. It's still beautifully
Felt
written.
Good, huh?
See, he wrote it in 1913 to 1914, and it wasn't published until 1971. Because I think he felt that it was not publishable because of its theme and because of how exposing it was. I mean, I think his books are often about people undergoing big emotional upheaval, which they keep in check. And it's all about kind of, it's a very sort of stiff upper lip. We're British and we don't talk about that sort of thing. I think all of his books, kind of have that underlying theme, and it very much goes along that line. But it is a beautifully written book. Actually, it's lovely. I think the book has the same problems as the film. I think the characterization isn't outstanding.
Yeah.
I think the inner life of the characters isn't particularly three-dimensional or nuanced. I came away from the film feeling much the same as I did from the book, where I kind of think I felt a little bit like I was watching it from the outside in, but I didn't really key into the proper inner life of the characters.
Is that true of the book as well? Or is there a lot of explanation of the characters and their thoughts in the book?
I mean, there is quite a bit of characters and thoughts, but it's still not tremendously deep, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the affair that Maurice has in the second half of the film, and that kind of closes out the film. That's like the third act of the film, I suppose. It's with this gamekeeper, Scudder, Alex Scudder, and their relationship in the film is very much the same as their relationship in the book, which seems to slightly come out of nowhere. And then I find it a little bit difficult to understand, exactly what the characters' motivations are.
Yeah.
Morris is a bit rude to Scudder, and he's kind of annoyed that the gamekeeper wouldn't accept his tip.
Yeah.
And then later on, Scudder kind of sneaks into his room and climbs in through the window, because that's what people do in these films.
Yes, you're right.
And and they sort of get it on. And then sort of, later on, then Scudder sort of threatens him with blackmail, but then changes his mind again, and they feel close again. It all feels a little bit opaque, and it's kind of swerving from this way to that. And I didn't feel sure that I really understood, what his motivations were, or how he ticked.
And I think that's
the book or the film.
Yeah, I think that's why I think I used the word deliberate earlier, because Scudder he's introduced a long time before he becomes kind of a significant character. It's 30 or 40 minutes probably before we start to see him show some interest in the Maurice character. That he's working on the property of Hugh Grant's character. Was it Clive Dunham? Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's the
Pembridge, I think. So Pemberton. Pemberton.
Pendersley Park. So he's a gameskeeper. So obviously, Hugh Grant's character is super rich, and I think the class politics definitely play here. But he's set up so early, and I think you're absolutely right. It still seems like it comes out of nowhere. So I mean, we see that character early, but we don't see that they're interested in each other. There's no reason for them to be interested. There's very much a hierarchy of the characters, because Maurice is out there shooting game with I think it's Clive's brother-in-law or something like that. And it takes a long time to get there, but then all of a sudden they're both really just absolutely in love with each other. They have 2 encounters, and then they're going to spend their lives together. And it counters the deliberate nature of the rest of the film, because we take a couple of hours more or less to get there, and then things move suddenly all at once. And I think for me, this is probably true of all of their films, is they feel very stagey and talky. And hearing now that some of those films come from Forster's literature, you are taking something that's much bigger and trying to put it into a couple-hour movie. It's difficult, but I think it's also just like the settings and the staging and the way you're using these would have sort of become like parlor pieces or stagey theater kind of settings. It just ends up feeling kind of talky and not you're not getting characterization through what they're doing so much. You definitely get their class through what they're doing, or what they're smoking, or what their jobs are, or what they wear to dinner, but it's all kind of superficial. So I think all of the films feel they're so indebted to, or so much investigating of class structure. And, we definitely have class structure in the States too, but all these films seemed very foreign to me because I felt like you have to understand class and caste in England to understand these films fully.
Right.
And I think I'm a little bit on the outside. So I felt I'm doubly on the outside because there is definitely a cultural divide here. But I agree with you that what you see on screen and what you hear doesn't really match up with what the characters are really feeling or doing, and you really feel distant from them as a result. So I never get fully engaged, and I think I did mention that in the very beginning when we talked about it, that I didn't sympathize with the characters a whole lot, even though they were going through some real hellish changes or hellish cultural pressures. I didn't relate to them that sympathetically.
Yeah, it's a bit... sort of a bit difficult to like them, isn't it? I mean, you're exactly right about that thing about class. It's difficult to fully explain any British cultural artifact without referring to class. I think it's so ingrained into every aspect of the way of life in Britain. Watching this film did remind me a little bit when my cousin Chad from Canada, he came to visit us in the late 80s. And he was like really surprised when he arrived to see that we didn't live in the kind of house that you see in this film. Yeah. Full of dark wood and fussy Edwardian details.
Yeah.
Because I think, for a long time, this was the picture of England which was projected internationally. This is what England looked like to the rest of the world.
Exactly.
This is what people expected. I mean, and he didn't say it, but I think he was expecting a butler when he arrived, frankly. I mean, I think we kind of quite disappointed him with our little suburban bungalow. But in a way, it's not just the 80s. There is a kind of Britain which still exists, which is like that.
Yeah,
not for many people, but for some it does. Class remains an enormous cultural force in the UK.
I'd love to talk a little bit about Ben Kingsley because he does appear, and this is a couple years after Gandhi, maybe.
Yeah,
he's probably on set for 2 or 3 days at most. It doesn't look like he was in more than one space, really.
Yeah, it's like 4 setups or something, isn't it, virtually?
Yeah, at first I counted 2, and then he came back and was in a couple other setups. So, I think you're absolutely right, it's 4. It was... it's funny because he plays an American, too, and I think maybe that was to help, bridge this cultural divide. I couldn't figure it out. And he says something. I think we should mention that I guess he's like a mesmerist or something like that. He's trying to hypnotize.
Oh, that's the word, yes. I wrote down hypnotist, but mesmerist
he's
is
trying
a much
to hypnotize Maurice and either cure him of his homosexuality or at least have him acknowledge it. And Kingsley suggests that he move to a gay-friendly culture. He mentions, I think, France and Italy. And he says this weird line. It says, England has always been disinclined to accept human nature. And that comes from a Yank. So that's obviously a big thematic statement that the English would not accept this. But that's very funny. Having seen another country where you see it's been generations of men who've gone off to military school, and for a few years they've had dalliances with other men or young men. It seems like it is very much closeted. I guess it's very secretive, but at the same time, it's very very much a part of human nature. So it was an odd line, and it's an odd. It's an odd sequence of scenes that he's in, I think. I would have cut that, honestly. I don't know. But if you can get Ben Kingsley, if you can get Gandhi to do the film, right? You got to go with Gandhi, I suppose. Yeah, but exactly. It is quite odd, yes.
I think that's just kind of reminded me. I think there is a whole essay's worth of ideas about this film and its relation with the penis. Basically, this film has a very strange relation with the penis, doesn't it? It starts out with a man who's unable to say the word penis. Yeah, and he's able to draw a picture of a vagina on the sand, but then kind of sort of fluffs it when he tries to draw a penis. And then later on, Maurice goes to see the family doctor, Dr. Barry, who inspects his penis with a pen, doesn't he? He can't even touch it. He lifts it up with a pen in order to do his examination. I'll say if I tried to examine anyone at work just using a pen, I would probably be told off, I think.
I loved that scene because that's, what is his name? Denham
Elliott, isn't it?
Denham Elliott plays the doctor, and he seems to kind of put out to have to examine him, but it's not like he listens to his heart or lungs first. It's like the pants come off, He pulls out the little pen to examine the penis. And I'm wondering, can you tell if someone's gay by looking at their penis? What?
I think I must have missed that lecture. Yes, I think so.
What is this scene about? And then he finally says, homosexuality, this is unspeakable rubbish. Yeah, very odd. And then there was another scene that really caught me off guard, which is when Maurice is on a train and he's just sort of sitting across from this older man who immediately just makes this very violent, aggressive pass at him and tries to hug him and kiss him on the train. It was very, very abrupt. But I guess it just seemed an odd way to suggest that, okay, there are other gay men of various ages out there that we're just not seeing because we're trying to repress this whole thing. And then the big theme statement for the whole film at one point, I think Maurice says to Durham, he says, the Hugh Grant character, can the leopard change his spots? So it does talk about the nature and is this natural or not. So those two, the line from Kingsley, I think, and the bit about the leopard changing his spots, I imagine both those lines come right out of the book, but those seem to be big theme statements for the whole film.
Right, yep, yeah. Yes, the film has a strange relationship with facial hair as well, doesn't it? Because I wrote in my notes, Maurice and Clive keep swapping moustaches. Yes. It's like during any one particular scene, one of them might have a moustache, but not the other. But then later on, it'll be the other way round, and then they swap again.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how that works, and whether it means something or if it's just like a little nod to the audience. We can only afford one moustache.
I think it would have been great to examine the moustaches with a little pen. Explore the moustache.
I wrote down. I came away feeling that the theme of this movie was an imperative. It is telling you live your life.
Yeah.
Because by the end of the movie, Maurice does go and live his life. And it's not the life that he was born to. Apparently, Forster really struggled with the ending to the book and wrote many, many different endings, and it changed several times, I think.
Yeah.
But I think the ending that we get in the current published version, which is the same as the ending that's in the film, is one where I think you can feel confident that Maurice will go off and live with Scudder, but he will probably no longer be a stockbroker. He maybe won't be living in Britain. He'll maybe kind of they'll go off somewhere. And they'll have a smaller, less grand life, but they'll probably be happy because they can be themselves.
Hey, Italy ain't so bad. France ain't so bad. Even Argentina. Yes. It looked like they were going towards Argentina, but yeah, I agree with you. I think the ending was a little too clean for me in some ways because I figured there's a whole lot of crap that they're about to go through when they actually come out and try and live somewhere. And I think that might have been a really interesting story that I think if you'd cut some earlier, you might have been able to figure out how to get that drama in there. So it just the fact that it ends on Hugh Grant's character is a little bit odd, but I mean it works. But I think it was just a little bit too clean because this is a long film. You're waiting for something to really happen, and there's not a whole lot that happens, but there's some very, very compelling things that happen. But I would just be interested in seeing like what would it really be like if they were an out couple in England in 1914. I think that would have been an interesting film, but that's obviously not in the book, and they do seem pretty well wed to the book in their films. Yeah. Well,
we've seen. I've got to say this, which is that the main visual impression I came away with at the end of the movie was that Hugh Grant's hair. Hugh Grant overall, but his hair especially, so beautiful. I would say enough to make anybody start to feel special feelings.
I'm getting the special feelings just thinking about his hair. I want to inspect it with the special pen.
But that does lead me on to a quick round of my favourite game. I'm not going to pretend to be Hugh Grant, but I am going to ask, who am I?
Who am I?
The hairs on Hugh Grant's head.
Oh, if only.
The mustache. Can you be a mustache?
I've tried it before. I might try it again. If I had half of the hair on Hugh Grant's head, I would be a very happy man.
Oh, my God.
I did come away feeling that, I'd watched a film with quite a lot of doctors in it in Maurice and didn't feel particularly like any of them.
Oh, good.
But the person I'm most afraid of being, I came to at the end of the film, the person I really, really don't want to be is Simon Callow's teacher.
Yeah.
The guy who tries to explain sex without using any sex words at all.
Yeah.
There's something that kind of distills the British relationship with sex in his character. He certainly gives Maurice a far more comprehensive sex talk than my parents ever gave me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Illustrated.
That's the person I really don't want to be. I reckon, out of all the people, I am one of those boys in the background at Cambridge. Simply because, I mean, this is crass, but I had my supervisions in rooms just like that, in that building, in Gibbs building. Yeah. I went to that chapel. I picked up my post from that porter's lodge. Maurice and Clive tell each other they love each other on the steps to my library.
Oh, wow.
And especially, that haircut. I bet a lot of young men in the late 80s and early 90s had that haircut at Cambridge. And I had thicker hair back then. I aspired to that Hugh Grant haircut. So if I'm anybody, I am background boy at King's College. Did you see anybody that reminded you of you this week?
I didn't do very well on this at all.
You mean you're not one of the 5 only people who live in Los Angeles?
I think, now that you mention it, I probably am one of the 5 people in Los Angeles. Okay, I think I want to be Lucy. I love that job. But I differ from Lucy in the sense that my side gig of writing, I would actually keep pursuing. I wouldn't just drop that so that I could focus on drawing little doodles while I'm not doing any work at the office. So it's kind of Lucy-like, but I feel a bit more like Danny where, I don't know, just non-committally hanging out with the girlfriend. For how long were they together? 6 years, and then all of a sudden not going to London, although I kind of went to London instead. So I felt a little bit like Danny, the lame boyfriend.
Yeah, you're the anti-Danny. You went to London.
And what was his gig? Was he a DJ or something? I forget what he...
I think I'm guessing he's a music journalist.
Yeah, it was something that he could do anywhere.
If you can make a living out of that these days and and afford an apartment in Los Angeles, well done you. I don't think there's a lot of money in music journalism these days.
Yeah, exactly. So either Danny or Lucy or Den Lucy or Luce Dunny or something like that.
So, some kind of, some average amalgamation of this.
There was some sort of ruckus outside, so...
Oh, exciting.
I hope that doesn't make...
We're talking about real life now, not the movie.
Yeah. Like a truck hitting all the potholes on our street, something like that. A lorry. Yes. So that's, I think somewhere in there, I really always find a hard time relating to a lot of the characters in the period pieces or the heritage pieces. Because I don't, my footing's not there. I don't feel like I'm on terra firma. It's a completely different world for me. But there's some funny characters. I loved the Doctor. I liked the Alex Scudder character. That's Rupert Graves. I thought that was a pretty interesting character, but at the same time, he didn't make a whole lot of sense to me either. That the connection they had, I couldn't believe it. But I liked the idea that he was this gameskeeper, and he at times spoke very well, but his writing was pathetic. Remember, like he obviously had some schooling, but his family seemed a bit more well-to-do than he was. There were a lot of confusing things about it, and but I did like that character. I just didn't believe that they would fall in love. But hey, love conquers all, something like that, right?
Love conquers all. If it was set in the modern day, Alex Scudder could use ChatGPT to write a better love.
That's right.
That's how it would work out.
Remake Maurice, but call it Maurice this time, for goodness sake. Or spell it differently, please.
Right. So 2 films about coming out. Let's do our synthesis, see if we can draw the 2 together, see if we've learned anything in the last 100 years. Strokes chin, I wonder.
I think we've learned that at the very least it's easier to come out now.
I think it is, I wrote down here 2 films about coming out, but they couldn't be more different, which is a good thing, something we should be proud of. So
exactly.
I agree.
I mean, when you think about the pinch in Maurice, the pinch is this scene where the buddy gets arrested for whatever, indecent exposure or
soliciting or something
soliciting
like that.
Sexual favors or whatnot, and he's going to go to 6 months of hard labor in prison or something like that. And that's the moment. I mean, it's pretty clever. It's the moment that says to Hugh Grant's character Clive that he's going to change his ways.
Yep.
And And there's this very odd spot where he goes to Greece ever so briefly. And they had mentioned Greece, I think, the vice of the Greeks, when they were reading Ovid together. Clive and Maurice are reading Ovid together. And it's, I thought for a moment, for sure, actually, I thought that, they were going to go to Greece together and they were going to love one another in the Greek way or whatever. But then he has this big moment where he just realizes he has to change his character for society. And the idea of, it's almost the exact opposite journey for Lucy in Am I OK, right? She needs to actually realize that society has changed enough for her to come out already. So they have very different journeys in that way. And I think that's a great little sign of progress in the world, I think. And the films, as we said, are what, like maybe 80 years apart? Oh, no, 100. A little over 100
years apart, 110 years apart, I suppose, the events of the movies, yes. I mean, I made a little list. Maurice is afraid of arrest, imprisonment, being ostracized, having to leave society altogether, the disapproval of everyone, shame, secrecy, self-loathing, conversion therapy. And I wrote a list for Lucy. She is afraid of awkward embarrassment. She is a bit too shy to kiss the various extremely attractive women who are throwing themselves at her all the way through the film. And the her other terrible difficulty is she has to cope with leaving her blueberry muffin until after her workout.
Oh, that's right.
So they are both facing hardships, but they're hardships of a different kind. So when you watch these films back to back, you know what? There's one word that comes to mind, and the word is progress. For all that I get, a bit down about the state of the world, we do live in better times.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's something kind of to be celebrated, frankly.
I think so. And if I could put a little plug in there for progressives in general, none of these acts of progress or movements come from conservative thinking, I don't think. I mean, when you think about it, Maurice is really a critique of the old ways and conservative thinking and just overt classism, I think. And progress doesn't come from those people. Progress comes from people who want things to change as opposed to stay the same. So had to go out on a little limb there. Would you agree with that? I mean, is that okay?
I think, thank God for people who want to make things a bit better. Yep, absolutely.
I would just add that, in no way do my opinions reflect those of the Two Real Cinema Club and its producers and its listeners.
It's only the sponsors that we need to stay on the right side of. Well, I feel like for all the tears and emotional upheaval, we've come out with a bit of a cheerful note by drawing these two films together. Yeah, something to be proud of at last. At last. Just enough time then to talk about what else has been playing at this theatre. As usual, I'm going to force my way to the front of the queue because the thing that's been playing at my theatre is only what was playing at your theatre, I think 2 or 4 weeks ago. Which is that we have been watching Ripley on Netflix. Which I think that was playing at your theatre, wasn't it? 2 or 4 weeks ago.
It was. About 2 months ago.
So on your recommendation, we have sat down and we've been watching either an episode or half an episode of that every evening.
Oh, good. Yeah.
And it's just fantastic. Yeah. It's great. I keep having to pinch myself. I cannot believe that a limited television series can look quite so beautiful.
Yeah.
It just looks absolutely fantastic. It's incredible. Skillful decision, very clever to make it in black and white.
Yep.
But just scene after scene where I'm pretty much kind of aghast at how beautiful it looks, just amazing, and tremendously tense, great performances, very tight. We are 1 or 2 episodes from the end, so it's all to play for now. Been enjoying it very much. So thanks for the tip.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. I envy you. I think it's 8 episodes total or something like that. So it ends up being probably 7+ hours of television. Real writer's project. Stephen Zillian really going back, and I think I guess he's more loyal, more faithful to the writing than to the book than Anthony
Minghella.
Jeez. Thank you. Between us, we got it. Which I like the film too, honestly, but I think that the series is excellent, and it takes us to Italy, and I'm going to stay in Italy for a quick moment because a recommendation to myself was the Pompeii, the New Dig, which we talked about last episode, where the documentary on public television here about digging up a new neighborhood of Pompeii and discovering things. And that led me to something I watched as a child and wanted to see again, Pink Floyd live at Pompeii.
Oh!
Which is excessive. It's not very good. There's not nearly enough Pompeii in it. But I'm almost finished with it. It's been a little hard to go through because the music is not that musical at times. They do a couple of great songs, but they also just do a lot of noise. And I always wonder, how is it that great musicians don't realize that they're just making a ruckus of a lot of noise and they should stop immediately, and then they go on for 10 minutes?
At what point in their career did they record this? Was this after Dark Side of the Moon?
I think it's after, I want to say either Metal or is the name of the album Echoes. It's before Dark Side, because Dark Side's like 74. I think this was 1972.
Right.
It's not sure why it's in the Colosseum at Pompeii. They do show, they occasionally like split in images of paintings in Pompeii and some of the columns and streets and things like that, but there's not a whole lot of it in there, and it's mostly... the first 10 minutes are a lot about David Gilmour's nipple, his right nipple to be precise, because it's obviously a hot day and they're playing their instruments without shirts on in the daytime scenes, and he's not wearing a shirt, so it's just his guitar strap and his Fender Stratocaster, and then sadly the way the film is cut, you see basically his nipple, but you don't see his head. And then it does one of these, there's a lot of trickery where you see the same image 16 times in this grid or matrix of the same image. They're playing a lot with some of the newfound technologies of the era. And there's all this sort of fetishism around Nick Mason, who I think is probably the weakest player. He's the drummer in Pink Floyd, and there's way too much of him on screen throughout. It's just odd. But, again, I saw this when I was a kid, maybe 1980 or something like that. And I was really into Pompeii, and I was already pretty much into Pink Floyd. So at the time it was great, and now it's not so great. But I went back to public television, too. I watched the No Direction Home. It's the Bob Dylan, Martin Scorsese documentary about the early years of like going from being a folky to picking up the electric guitar and being in a rock and roll band. And it's over 3 hours, but I broke that up and watched it bit by bit, and that was great too. So hats off to public television for sending me in another direction with sending me to Pompeii and then sending me No Direction Home.
I feel like public television, it should be, the home for progressives, isn't it?
Is
that
is.
Right?
Absolutely.
It is. So yet another vote for progress.
Have we mentioned them recently, the progressives? We got to mention them. We got to mention Tom Hanks, because I did see this play that was sort of written by Tom Hanks recently, a reading of it, and it was not good. But that's not... Tom, speaking to you directly now. I think your short story on which the play is based, although I've never read it, I'm sure that's very good. I just think maybe it's not to be a play. And if you still want to do the podcast, you are always welcome.
I'm sure I can hear him typing an email as we speak, furiously complaining about how he's been treated on our podcast.
Texting it. It's coming onto our screen minds. This is something I didn't mention about Am I OK? Texts on screen. This is kind of a cliche now. I hate it.
Yeah.
I hate it. It's like people won't read a subtitle to understand a foreign film, but they will read a text message of just absolute trite quality that has nothing to do with anything and gives you no information. It's just, I don't like seeing people's phones. I don't want to go to a cinema or turn on a film to watch people text each other. Please make that cliche squad, please make that go away. I hate to vent here, but at the end of the show, because we've had a great program and now I'm just getting angry.
Shakes fists at cloud. ... Yes, I can just imagine millennials rolling their eyes at us right now, saying, listen to these old geezers. Next time, in between the texts, we'll be watching a film with a title which is very close to my heart. We are watching I Used to Be Funny.
Oh, yeah.
And we will be comparing it to...
Wait a second, is this a Tom Hanks film? It is.
I think it is a Tom Hanks film.
Tom, we're going to talk about you extensively and positively when we review Punchline from 1988,
I think.
Oh my God, close to Maurice, except this one we can pronounce properly. Punchline.
Punchline.
Tom Hanks.
I really hope we don't watch Punchline next week and it turns out I've been saying the name wrong all these years. It's actually Punchline.
Punchline.
Thanks for joining us as always. You can find us on Instagram at 2 Real Cinema Club. The Read the blog at tworealcinemaclub.com, comment on our YouTube channel, or email us, as Tom Hanks does, tworealcinemaclub@gmail.com. Short pod this week, not bad. We're getting back to a manageable length, maybe because the films went too long.
Yeah.
We'll try and keep this trend up. Thanks for joining us as always. We'll be at the Popcorn Counter next week doing some old nonsense, and then back with Tom Hanks the week after.
Yes.
See you then.
Goodbye, everyone.